Hello to all the participants. This is Shilpa, and I'm working as an assistant professor at Maharaja Agrasen Institute of Management Studies, affiliated to Guru Gobind Singh Indraprastha University. I'm also pursuing my PhD degree from University of Delhi. Prior to my teaching experience, I was working as a technical writer for Emphasis. And today, I'll be taking you through this presentation, how to develop effective content with a special emphasis on ADDIE model. At the end of this presentation, you will be able to identify step-by-step activities to be performed at different phases of the end-to-end process of content development. Before we proceed to learn about the process of developing effective content, it makes sense for us to ponder on the nature of the 21st century content. Henry Jenkins, who is often hailed as the 21st century McLuhan, has a very interesting observation about the nature of 21st century content. And that is, what we are now seeing is the hardware diverging while the content converges. What he means to indicate is that in the 21st century, you cannot control content. You may choose to build your content for one particular media platform. But soon, your content is going to flow across different media platforms. So now, what is the implication of this migratory nature of content in the context of educational content? First, it means that content is spreadable. What this implies is that content no longer stays where you actually want it to be. It goes wherever learners want it to go. We can try to control it, but it seems to leak, short circuit, and show up in different pathways. As a result of this, boundaries that separated instructor-led training and e-learning is soon fading, because the content that you prepare for your classroom teaching may soon be shared across a variety of mediums and file formats. The material that you prepare to be printed for your classroom may become online and can be viewed via an app. So today, the challenge for content developers is to create value and meaning of their content across different mediums. So how do we develop content with universal value across the medium? You might wonder, is there a formula that actually can help us create such a content? Or is there a model that we can adapt while we build content? Let's see if there is anything like that. Here's a formula for good content if you like. When well thought out design combines with development, what we get is good content. Often when we think of content development, we only think about it as a process of development or creation without realizing that creative process of content development must begin with a great design. Design is not the same as development. What is the difference between design and development? Let's take a look. Decision. Design is a decision. Development is doing. So design refers to all the decisions or choices that a content developer makes with regard to selecting, organizing, and specifying the learning experiences necessary to teach somebody something. Design governs what we do. Development governs how we carry out those decisions. Just like how, while constructing a building, an architect is dependent on the blueprint in the content creation. A content developer is dependent on the design. So it's important not to underestimate the role of planning of the good content. And if we want to really create good content, we must first begin with good design. Here's a model that actually can help us create great content. And what is that model? Take a look. It's called as the ADDIE model. Let's talk about the ADDIE model briefly. ADDIE model represents one of the oldest instructional design models. ADDIE, like all the instructional models, is actually meant to help would-be content developers to create lessons in a systematic, methodical, and organized manner. The ADDIE, being in use since 1940s, represents the essential phases of content development. And what are the essential phases of content development? The first one is the analysis phase, followed by the design phase, then by the development phase, followed by implementation, and finally, it ends with the evaluation phase. Let us take a look at each of these phases in some detail. The first phase is the analysis phase. What, or rather, whom should you analyze? We need to analyze, as content developers, our learners. Smith and Regan, both content designers, say the danger in not analyzing the characteristics of the audience is assuming that all learners are alike. And even more common error is assuming that the learners are like the designers. So when we begin developing content, or even with the right at the start of the project of content creation, it is very important to research about the groups of our potential learners. When we start researching, what are we supposed to research? Here's what we are supposed to research. The first thing, the demographics. We need to ask questions like, what age group is our learners? What is their educational background? What kind of English proficiency do my learners have? And then, how comfortable are they with the technology? Then, we must try to understand about the environment in which our learners are likely to take our courses. Will your learners take your courses from home? Will they be taking courses while they travel? Does the environment have interruptions? Does the environment have noise? Will the noise disturb the learner? What time of the day the course is likely to be taken? Similarly, we need to know about the level of knowledge of our learners. What level of knowledge does the learner already have? Are they likely to have trouble understanding the information? Are they likely to have trouble applying the information? Then we need to know about the motivation levels. How receptive are our learners to learning in general? And how receptive are they to the particular topic for which content you're creating? Are they really motivated, or are they trying to get around with just the mandatory training? Finally, is there anybody in the target audience with any of the special auditory, visual, motor, or cognitive needs? Knowing more about your audience can help you make better decisions regarding formats to be used, presentation techniques, structure of content, and the evaluation types. Then comes the next stage on the ADDIE model, which is the design phase. This is the planning phase that helps you make important decisions, such as whether or not the content is needed in the first place. If needed, what will you teach and what is the best way to teach it? You'll create a roadmap of what you want to accomplish and how you plan to get there. If the design phase is conducted and documented properly, any content developer could pick up this roadmap and begin to develop the content. At this phase, we are supposed to determine or make choices about certain important aspects of our content. And what are those aspects? Let's take a look. First, we need to decide on the length of our course. Would it be a 20-hour course or would it be a 40-hour course? The length would then determine the scope of your content. What topics would you actually include in your course or lesson? What would you leave out? Would you want your course to be self-paced by the learner, where your learners get to choose what to complete and when to complete? If not, then are you going to determine the pace, and how are you going to pace your course for your learners? Next, you should also determine what are the prerequisites. That is, by identifying what knowledge, skills, and abilities do we expect the learners to have before taking the course. Then, translate content goals into measurable learning objectives. The next step is, what is the structure or the sequence of your content? Here's a word on the course structure and sequence. You can begin to organize your content by deciding on an order and flow of the material. You can choose different organizational principles for sequencing your content. You may choose simple to complex organizational principle, or high priority to low priority content, general to specific, or you may choose to put your content in the order of how a job proceeds in the real world. At this stage, you should also create high-level flowcharts of topics, either in the form of content outline, if it is primarily text content, or a storyboard if you're using multimedia content. Remember, you're not writing the content at this stage, but you're outlining the courses, modules, lessons, and topics. Next, you should also design the instructional strategies. Instructional strategies basically determine what is the best way to present your information to your learners and how to allow for practice and feedback and to assess the learner's performance. Some common instructional strategies include video presentation, audio presentation, text narrative, lecture, question and answer, on-the-job training format, scenarios, demonstrations, discussions, group activities, self-directed research, assignments, exploratory activities, simulations, to name a few. Finally, at the design stage, you may also create a template. A template is going to help you because with the template, you can just simply plug in the information into the template that you have created. It not only saves your time, but it also saves the learners from having a whiplash experience of unpredictable layouts of information. Application of design must happen at all levels of your content, whether it is at the level of curriculum being right at the top of the content pyramid means it's a collection of courses related to a subject. Design must also apply to a course, which is basically composed of a cluster of small components called as lessons. The design must also apply to lessons, which is a cluster of topic that is organized to accomplish one of the broad objectives. And then design also applies to a topic which is basically meant to accomplish a single learning objective. And finally, to an activity that is at the lowest bottom of the content pyramid, which is meant to either practice or is meant to test the content that you have already given. The next phase is the stage or the phase of development. It primarily involves four main activities. The first activity involved at the development stage is writing or creating content. Following writing or creating content is the next activity, which is assembling your content according to the organizational design, followed by reviewing and editing your content, and finally ending with the activity of publishing your content. Let's start with the writing or creating of content. Once you've designed your course, how are you going to get those ideas that you plan to come to life? How will you capture all the elements as you planned in every section of your content? And how will it all function? It can be sometimes overwhelming. So, from where do we start writing? A good place to begin your content creation is by picking up the course outline or the storyboard that you designed in the previous phase and work with a single self-sufficient section of content, or what is often referred to as a learning object. Let's learn something more about the learning object. What is a learning object? Learning object can be identified as a chunk of content, electronic or otherwise, that can be accessed individually and which accomplishes a single learning goal and can prove it. In other words, a learning object is a very specific item of knowledge that accomplishes a single learning objective and includes exercises and tests that actually prove that the learner has learned the content, making it a self-contained unit of learning. Here are certain thumb rules while developing content. The first one, stick to the learning objective like a charter. Anything that does not contribute to accomplishing the objective should be clearly omitted. Next, keep your content clear, concise, and personal. As we write in a growingly digitalized world, it is important to remember that more and more learners are going to access your content sitting alone, either in front of a computer or otherwise. So it is important to write as if you're talking to an individual and not to an anonymous group. And to write in a way that he or she can easily understand without anybody's help. Next, keep formatting and navigation consistent through the course. To prevent the whiplash experience, it is very important to keep consistency in the visual appearance of your content. So therefore, the style and formatting must be consistent through the course. If possible, try to make your instructional strategies and testing approaches also consistent. The template that you created at the design phase can come handy at this stage. Next, for making your content more effective, try to make it multimodal. Use different media such as text and visual to make it more effective. Then, try to divide your content into several chunks of information with appropriate headings. Chunking information is said to be very effective, as first, it is very easy to be scanned by the learner. Second, chunking of information is also supposed to help learners increase retention. Then, chunking of information is also set to increase comprehension among learners. And finally, chunking information into small sections makes it easier for learners to access your information. Include practice and evaluation segments that helps to repeat and revise content. And finally, as far as possible, avoid as shown above syndrome, because uh, if a learner is going to access your content sitting at home, there is no set path as to how he would access your content. So once you create your content, then we need to assemble all the sequence or the chunks of content together, then proofread it at least a couple of times, make the appropriate changes, make at least one final self-review before publishing the content. These are the activities that normally are done at the development stage. The next stage is the implementation stage. What is to be done here? By now, your course or your lesson has been developed. You've put in your time and energy, and your course is ready. So you can breathe easy. But can you actually sit back and relax? Almost, but not yet. At this stage, there are certain activities that we expect a content developer to do. And they are, first, intimate your learners about your course being published. prepare them to use the content, and if learners need any help, either in terms of technology or in accessing your content, do a bit of hand holding. Then, at the end comes the evaluation phase. For continuously making your content better, it is very important to evaluate your content. So one of the models that is very popularly used for evaluating content is Donald uh, Kirkpatrick's model of evaluation. According to this model, you can evaluate your learning courses on the basis of how the learners react to your model, in the sense that what do they think about your course. You can also evaluate on the basis of their learning, that is by determining whether or not your learners actually learned what they were supposed to learn. Then you can also evaluate your course on the basis of whether or not there was a real change in behavior of your learners, if that was one of your course objectives. And finally, you can evaluate your course on the basis of results. That is, whether or not there is a material change in how your learners are able to achieve the results that they are supposed to achieve. So once this is done, your content is ready, but then the content development process proceeds in a cycle of analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. So in a nutshell, in this presentation, we have seen the nature of content in the 21st century, the role and importance of design in content development, and we have seen how ADDIE model can help us create content systematically. If you want to learn more about content development, these are some of the books that you can actually refer. I hope the presentation was helpful. Thank you.